Story 1. My horrible fifth-grade teacher showed us Gremlins, and for days I had nightmares that my father was going to get stuck in a chimney and burned to death. Ironically, I did not find the Gremlins themselves to be particularly scary. Story 2. Frosty the Snowman sounds innocent enough, but the part where he melted and the little girl was crying made me bawl as a child. Now, as a 31-year-old kindergarten teacher, I won't show it to my kids. Story 3. Chucky. I was maybe 6 years old. I went downstairs at night because I wasn't feeling well. My dad was asleep on the couch, but the television was playing the movie Chucky. It's safe to say that stupid little doll haunted me for years. Story 4. I was about the same age as Damien when I saw it and was being raised in a Catholic family and going to a Catholic elementary school run by ancient and strict nuns. I am not Damien, I am not Damien, I am not Damien. Story 5. I saw Children of the Corn at about 5 or 6 years old at home with my dad. I was okay with it until they attacked the old people in the cafe. They reminded me of my grandparents, and I just started screaming. My dad got in a lot of trouble for that. Story 6. Dumbo. The scene where his mother is locked up and reaches her trunk through the bars to caress her child. Also, the disturbing psychedelic pink elephants on parade scene, which gives a fine representation of a bad trip to a 5-year-old. Story 7. The never-ending story. Not just the scene but also the wolf and the turtle, and to be honest, most of the movie, yet I rewatched it more times than I could count. Story 8. Cujo gave me one of my first prominent nightmares that I remember to this day. Also, Jeepers Creepers that still haunts my worst fictitious dreams. Story 9. Sightings and unsolved mysteries. It was telling me spontaneous human combustion could happen at any moment, and I could be abducted by aliens while in my bed. Story 10. Star Trek. It was that episode where they picked up a bunch of kids from a planet where all the adults had died and been buried, and the kids were controlled by a green ghost-like entity. They made all the crew members feel their worst fears. I think what put me over the top was when Uhura saw herself in a mirror and she was crying because she looked really old. I had a nightmare that night, and as a result, my parents banned all of us from watching Star Trek for at least 5 years. Story 11. House. I was channel surfing one day and I landed on House. More specifically, I landed on the episode where the mom tried to smother her baby with her body. I can watch the show now, but that really upset me as a kid. Story 12. The Black Cauldron. It was already a bit old when I was a kid, but the Horned King gave me nightmares for years. That, and a movie about a set of triplets who get involved in black magic. I don't even remember the plot, but I do remember the vivid nightmares I had after seeing this one. Story 13. My babysitter allowed me to watch Candyman when I was like 6. Traumatized me. I didn't sleep properly for days. I've avoided horror movies into adulthood. Story 14. Requiem for a Dream. The close-up shots as well as the score really scared me as a kid. My brother told me to watch it. On the positive side, I really had a negative view of drugs after that. Story 15. Pinocchio and the Emperor of the Night. Filmation's attempt to trick people into thinking Disney made a sequel to their beloved children's movie of years gone by, and thus fork over that sweet, sweet Disney money. How did that traumatize me? Well, besides the fact that this was during the era where Don Bluth could conjure pure, unadulterated nightmare fuel and release it as a kid's movie, there's a scene. I don't actually remember much about the context. But somehow, the became a real boy in what was definitely the previous movie Pinocchio is at a stage performance held by an evil wizard. And circumstances conspire that the evil wizard begins playing an organ grinder, forcing Pinocchio to dance against his will. Pinocchio begs and pleads to stop. The wizard does not. He grinds the organ faster, ever faster, forcing the child to dance faster and faster. And as the tempo and volume rise, Pinocchio begins turning back into a puppet. Pinocchio's pleas for mercy grow more frantic, but the wizard just cackles, grinding that organ, the music intensifying, until finally, Pinocchio falls to the floor, his lifeless puppet mouth clattering to a standstill, his eyes completely dead. Gove mir nightmares. I tried to watch that scene again as an adult and had an anxiety attack. I still have a reaction, a revulsion, really, to certain depictions of mind control in media. Story 16. Swiss Family Robinson, 1960. I was freaked out at the beginning when the pirates attacked the ship. So my mom took me out to the theater lobby and had to explain that it was just a story and not really happening. Story 17. I watched a movie that traumatized me, but I don't know what it was. Can you help? Here is the scene that scared me. A man is chasing a woman up a rope. The rope is going up a tall cliff right over rocks and the ocean below. At the top of the cliff, there is a bad guy who starts to cut the rope. They seem to be wearing pirate-like clothing. Maybe it was Pirates of the Caribbean. I've never seen it as an adult. That's all I remember from the movie. I was in grade 3 or 4, and they showed it to us at school during an indoor recess in northern British Columbia, as it was very cold outside. That tells me it must have been somewhat of a kid's movie. Story 18. The Peanut Butter Solution. A kid gets so scared in a vacant house that all of his hair falls out. So he makes a concoction of peanut butter and rubs it on his bald head. His hair not only comes back, it grows very fast, full, thick, long, and beautiful. All's well that ends well, right? Not quite, because now a random terrifying man kidnaps him and puts him in a cage so he can use his hair to make paintbrushes. That's how I remember it anyway. Estimated time of arrival. Just looked it up because I thought it couldn't quite be how I remembered. Celine Dion did the music. Story 19. My father was a bit cavalier about what was best or safe for his children, and I was the youngest of 4. When I was 11 or 12, he took us to see The Exorcist when it opened in theaters, and I was traumatized. I suffered night terrors as a child and chronic recurring sleep paralysis, and I still do, which he did not know or remember. Story 20. One of my first memories of television was a Saturday morning kids show that might have been called The Lost Triangle. Anyway, the theme song included the lyric, "Hiding in the bushes is a watchful pair of eyes," and then cut to this scary-looking guy in the bushes. Freaked me out. Story 21. I saw Nosferatu when I was a kid. The scene where Nosferatu is standing in the doorway is permanently burned into my brain. Now I have several Nosferatu posters in my room. Story 22. Courage the Cowardly Dog, specifically the episode where Courage is locked inside a bathroom with a barber, I think. His voice gave me the willies. I wish I remembered the episode. Story 23. I have no idea why, but it was a Little Einstein's episode when the little wooden things are stuck in sap. I would apparently scream and cry when it came on. No idea why. Story 24. War of the Worlds, 1950s version at age 5. Really got in my brain and lives rent-free 50 years later. The twisted pictures of destruction I drew at school. I'll never know how they never got me tested for something. Story 25. I think I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. I was traumatized when the whale swallowed Pinocchio. I started screaming, and my mother had to take me out of the theater. We did not return. Story 26. I cried when King Kong died. I cried when E.T. died. And I remember hating The Secret of Nim, but I don't know why. I was 5 when I saw it. I haven't seen it in 40 years. Story 27. Tremors terrified me as a kid, not so much as an adult. Also, Little Nemo was excessively dark and creepy for a kid's movie, not to be confused with Finding Nemo. Story 28. I saw A Man Called Horse with Richard Harris at the cinema. I've just looked it up, and it must have been 1970, so I was 16, but I found it very gruesome. Story 29. Jaws. I was 6 or 7 when I saw part of it, and I was afraid to take a bath. An American Werewolf in London. I was around 10 when I watched it. The opening scene was the 2 guys in a pub, and they were told, "Beware of the moon and stick to the road." They wandered off the road and got attacked. It was wintertime and got dark early. While doing my paper route, if it was after dark, I refused to walk across anyone's lawn. Driveways and walkways only. That was the safe space. Story 30. Chucky. The amount of traumatizing dreams I've had of him, the fact that you couldn't kill him always terrified me. A virtually immortal and persistent small killer doll that manipulates you, and no matter how you dispose of him, he will find you again. Story 31. Chicken Run and Ubi Hand puppets horrified me for some reason. I was watching shows like Bones Unfazed. But Chicken Run? I still can't watch it, and I refuse to watch things animated in the same style now. I used to even watch Never-Ending Story and Bridge to Terabithia 20 times in a row, and neither upset me as badly as Chicken Run did. Story 32. I watched The Hired Hand when I was 9. It starts off with a group of people finding a floating corpse of a little girl in a river, and then there's a scene where they shoot the soles of someone's feet. Story 33. I couldn't watch The Simpsons for years because my introduction to it was the movie, and something about it scared me so badly. It's now one of my favorite shows, though. Story 34. Not a single mention of Invader Zim? Well, what made me stop watching it was the episode where that kid who's obsessed with being Zim's friend has his eyes replaced with robotic ones so that he sees other living things as Zim. That was super graphic and scared me badly. Story 35. Pinocchio. They smoke cigars and get turned into donkeys, and he gets swallowed by a whale. I still haven't rewatched it. Properly vile film. Story 36. I never even watched this movie, but I remember seeing the trailer of 2012 on the television with the huge tsunami waves when I was 7 or 8, and that scene scarred me. I had nightmares of dying from a huge wave for days after. Funny is that I also was a Justin Bieber fan when he was very popular back then, and I had a dream I was at a Justin Bieber concert on stage, only for a tsunami to come out of nowhere. It also caused me to be afraid of the ocean. Story 37. I've got a weird one. The Living and the Dead, 2006. Super obscure British indie flick. I watched it when I was 14, so I guess I was technically a child. Story 38. Not much, but when I was young and watched RoboCop 2, there's a part where the bad guys restrain Duffy, a crooked cop who betrayed them, and slice him vertically from chest to belly, and it was pretty graphic for a 9-year-old. I remember not entirely getting the image out of my mind when I was younger. It's insignificant now, but that was one that stuck with me. Story 39. Apologies for being old as dirt, but I was terrified watching the 1964 film Fail Safe with Henry Fonda, which is kind of like Dr. Strangelove, but deadly serious. As I recall, there's a scene where we hear the American ambassador in Moscow saying he's hearing an airplane, followed by a loud squeal. The squeal was from the ambassador's phone melting from the heat of an atomic bomb. And that's not the saddest part of the movie. I sat out the rest of the film in the lobby. I was 10 years old. Story 40. It's going to sound silly, but The Gate, 1987. I had recurring nightmares about those horrible little demons. I watched it recently and was actually pretty impressed with the claymation. Story 41. I have a phobia of dinosaurs because when I was 6, I was having an anxiety attack and went to find my parents. I walked in on them watching the Tyrannosaurus Rex in the rain scene from Jurassic Park. Story 42. A National Geographic documentary that detailed the mating habits of African animals with close-ups, computer simulations, and meter-long appendages. I was 8. Story 43. Pearl Harbor. I wasn't supposed to see that lady die with her eyes open, and I was like 6. I still can't watch it 22 years later. Also, some of those Courage the Cowardly Dog episodes were creepy. Story 44. When I was really small, maybe 3 or 4, Bambi. The beginning of the movie has the mother deer getting shot by hunters, and I understood that Bambi was alone in the world, and I was really too young to be contemplating that. When I got older, the made-for-TV movie The Day After was pretty traumatizing. They actually did an episode of The Goldbergs called The Day After the Day After, because a lot of kids were traumatized by that movie. To be fair, there was some weird obsession at that time with scaring kids with the threat of nuclear war. I was in 7th grade, and they made us read Hiroshima, which was awful, and On the Beach, which was not graphic but still frightening. Story 45. The live-action Jungle Book from the 1990s, I think. I watched it at my grandma's on her VCR, and the scene where the guy gets swallowed by quicksand terrified me. Story 46. I do not know the name, but there is an old black and white movie where a man in an old-fashioned diving suit went down a hole in a cave, with a group of people waiting at the top, and when they pulled him back up, there was only a skeleton in the suit. Story 47. There was this Shrek horror special where all the characters tell scary stories, and the one with the gingerbread man scared the life out of me when I was younger. Basically, Gingy asks the Muffin Man to create a wife for him, but he puts in too much sugar. When she ends up being baked, she becomes way too clingy, and he ends up pushing her into a pot of baking batter. But then it makes more of her out of the batter she was thrown into, and they come out as deformed zombies who eat him. I watched it last Halloween, and obviously it doesn't scare me anymore, but I can definitely see how it terrified me. Story 48. Not a movie or show, just a scene in a normally very child-appropriate show that I thought could be shared here. From my toddler memory, there was a man with very blonde hair and a white long-sleeve shirt who would pretend his hand was its own entity. There was a part where he snaked his hand up his shirt and was in a tussle with it. Then his hand just burst out from the neck hole. It scared the absolute life out of me as a little kid. I thought he was dying on camera, attacked by an alien arm. Funny to remember but traumatizing to baby me. After posting this, I remembered 2 more shows that scared me. A movie, Little Monsters. I don't remember anything about the movie except the main monsters put something in an apple bottle to get back at a bully, which was so funny, and a scene where someone's face got ripped off to reveal a monster's face. And it wasn't the show that traumatized me. I have no clue where my child brain got this from, but there was a show called A Monsters. I used to have vivid daydreams/intrusive thoughts where the main big bad teacher character used to scare the black and white character. I used to cry so hard thinking about that.